I bet you were thinking after I read that, why would we need another sermon? Because that sounds like a sermon. It sounds like little mini sermon. And it kind of is. It kind of is. It's kind of like, it's not really a soundbite or a meme. It's just kind of like a little capsule of stuff in the middle of the letter to the Ephesians. So it's important to remember. It's important to remember when we read Scripture what it is that we're reading. Because the Bible isn't a book, really. It's more like a library, isn't it? Where there's different sections, there's different things happening. There's stories that are meant to be historical accounts. There are stories of visions. There are stories that are fantasy and fiction. There are love stories. There's poetry. There's songs. And there's correspondence. So when the Bible was assembled, yes it was, by people, they put in this correspondence at the end of Christian scripture. You have to remember that's what it is, though. It's not like the Gospels that are a narrative, the story of Jesus, or even the book of Acts, which is the story of the first works of the first followers of Jesus. The correspondence part is different. The letters and the form in which we have them, by the way, are not how they originally might have appeared. Some of the things that we refer to as one letter might have been several. Some of the things that were several letters, they might have been one. We're not really sure. What we are sure, though, is that they were written to communities who had already established a community of faith. I want to call them churches, but they weren't yet. There's something very different. There were communities of people trying to live like Jesus. That's why the first followers of Jesus were called people of the way. They were trying to live like Jesus. And this will shock you. It didn't always go very well. And they weren't always really successful at it. And so some of the people who tried to help establish those communities, like Paul, for example, would write them letters of encouragement and support, but also letters with advice and instruction. Letters that reminded them what the point of living like Jesus is, which is living like Jesus. When we read from any of the letters, and frankly, it doesn't matter whether Paul wrote them or not, because, we're not really certain that Paul wrote all the ones that we say Paul wrote. There's really good scholarship that suggests he only wrote maybe half of the letters that we credit to him. The reason that they get credited to Paul is because whoever wrote them wanted to give them the authority of Paul. It would be like me telling you that don't listen to what I have to say, listen to what Nadia Bolz-Weber has to say. Listen to what a much better and much more authoritative figure than I am has to say. I need to quote them so that you will actually understand. Why? Why can't you hear me? Because week after week after week, I say exactly what was just written in the letter to the Ephesians. Why can't you believe the person who's sitting next to you? Why? Why do we need to have an authoritative voice? A voice that says, this is Scripture. You should do it. Because that's all these letters are. There's somebody's voice telling you what you might need to do in order to live out the stories that we tell you about Jesus. It shouldn't matter whether it's me or Paul or some guy who knew Paul and thought, I'll just use his name because that would be cool. It shouldn't matter whether it's the person sitting next to you. And I feel like I can say that with some, what's a good word, authority, because that's exactly how this first little piece of Ephesians begins, isn't it? Speak truth to your neighbor. Speak truth to your neighbor. That's the beginning of living like Jesus. There's so much more to do, because the point isn't, oh, that's a nice story. Perhaps Jesus will save me too. The story is, how shall I live like Jesus? That is my saving. I think we sometimes read Scripture and think, that sounds great. And then we go away. We feel better about it. We feel a little refreshed. We feel a little bit more positive about things maybe. But the point is that we live it. That's the point of so much of the letters, the correspondence that encourages these communities who struggled. We all have struggled with the story of Jesus. We've all struggled with trying to live like Jesus. There are moments, if you read the stories, there are moments that Jesus struggles with being Jesus. But when we speak truth to each other, when we speak words of support and encouragement, when we speak with kindness and care, when we offer healing, when we offer even just not our own voice, but our listening to others, we are living Jesus into the world. And that is what changes things. All of the words in any of Scripture aren't what changes things. It's you and me. We're the ones who change things. And we do that living like Jesus. Go and live like Jesus.